This next technique is what will be referred to as the real worry time machine. Now, it's called the real worry time machine because there's a specific component missing from people who worry, and that is the perceived lack of ability to be able to deal with the thing that they're actually worrying about. It's like the missing piece of the jigsaw that people aren't taking into consideration when they worry about something. If you saw a lion, you'd feel anxious, you'd be quite worried about it, and you'd do something about it. You'd either run away, or you would fight it, you'd kill it or something, or you'd scare it off. Worry closed. Now, the problem is with kind of our modern lives, we have these kind of lions that exist everywhere that we can't necessarily scare off, or you can't necessarily do anything about physically because it's something that's going to happen, it's something that might happen, it's something that might not happen. So what you're doing is when you worry about specifically what people think of you, you're not giving yourself the chance to experience the fact that you have all of the resources to deal with the actual fact if it does happen. So this is why it's referred to as a real worry time machine. Okay, so when you do this for yourself, I mean, I've put the timeline like this for illustration purposes. When you do it, again, like the verstehen process that you go through and continue to practice, it's best to do it physically, self, other, observer. This, again, it's best to do it physically at first because it gets you used to the process. You get used to the different feelings as you're kind of learning to be like in your own sort of shoes and then stepping out and looking at the situation and step back in again. And this technique as well, once you get good at it, you'll be able to use exactly the same circuit of worry that you were doing before, but you'll be doing this technique instead. So it's like completing the full worry loop, to complete that full circuit, so you don't necessarily need the worry as a resource anymore. You're still using the same skills, but you use them in a more beneficial way. By all means, you show concern for situations, but you don't necessarily need the worry. All right, this is how we go about doing it. Okay, so the first thing we need to do, or you need to do, is break down your worry sequence. So you break it down into step-by-step parts. When you do this for yourself, it'll be on your handout anyway, showing you how to break it down, and get as many little pieces of paper as you need and lay it out physically in front of you. So if your worry process has got 15 steps in it, you get 15 pieces of paper, put them along in a long line each step of the way, and we're going to step in to each part of the sequence for the part that we're worrying about. So we can kind of begin to build those resources to be able to use it as a real worry instead of something that you feared and nothing else. So you break it down into a sequence. All right, so you ask yourself, what is the very first thing that happens that lets me know that I'm worrying about what people think of me? What's the very first thing that happens that lets me know I'm worrying about what people think of me? I'm going to use one of my own examples, which is worrying about what women think of me, which is all just imagination. It's all up here. None of it's real. The danger with worrying about things is you worry about that and you avoid it, and pretty soon you've got this quite a strong kind of thing to avoid. You're not actually giving your mind or your brain the kind of chance to see if it is something worth worrying about or not, because you're avoiding it. All right, so just to kind of explain a bit, so I'm here. Literally, the first thing that sets it off for me is the thought of it, the thought of talking to a woman. That is enough. That is the very first thing that I think I want to worry about, what a woman would think of me. Okay. And then you say to yourself, so what's the very next thing that happens in that sequence that kind of leads to that worry, because it's not going to be one specific thing. You'll be going through a full imagined sequence, whether you imagine it kind of with your mind, with visuals and stuff, or whether you're saying things to yourself. There will be a full sequence that's going on there with a start, a middle, and an end. But we're going to end it after actually having done it and actually having experienced those unpleasant emotions as you're going through it. Okay, so it starts off with a thought. Okay, so and then what happens? Just think. Next part of the process for me. Then what happens? I've got think about the actual walking up to talk to her. And then what happens? We've got actually stopping him. Then we've got actually having a conversation. And then I'll leave it on this line, asking for a number. Okay. So that's the full sequence from start to finish about the thing that I'm worrying about when I worry about what will you think of me. Starts with the very thought of it, and then the actual part of walking up to it, stopping her, actually having a conversation, and then asking for the number. That's the full sequence of the full kind of timeline as it happens from start to end. That's my worry sequence for that specific thing. Now, here is where you're going to have to, you've got to be willing to experience the very sensations that you've been fearing and worrying about. So if you worry about what your partner might think of you, if you worry about what your friends might think of you, if you do public speaking, if you do, I don't know, if you've got a speech, if you've got standing up to your boss saying you can't take any more work on, anything like that, you need to go from the full sequence and imagine it out. So at each step of the way, you ask yourself, what is the very worst thing that can happen at each point? So you take it first step, what is the very first thing that can happen when I have that thought? Now, bearing in mind, this won't involve any other actors or any other participants or any other persons in this situation at this time. What is the very worst thing that I can think could happen when I have that thought? For me, it's literally just a really strong feeling of fear and anxiety. That's the very worst thing that I could think of could happen when I think about going up and talking to a lady. Okay, then you ask yourself, am I willing to have that experience? So what's the very worst thing that can happen when I have that experience? Write it down. Might be a number of scenarios. You've probably been getting quite severe and harsh with this anyway. Just get as harsh as you can. The very worst thing that can happen. And ask yourself, am I willing to have that experience? This won't work. This time machine, this process will not work if you're not willing to have the experiences that you're fearing. But end of. Because if you're not willing to have those experiences, and all you've got left is worry, and you're trying to push away these things that very much might come up, and you're trying to get away from that anxiety. This is when your anxiety can turn into a kind of symptom set. Rather than using your anxiety as a kind of signal system, something to pay attention to, something to suss out and think, hang on a minute, let's just kind of take this a bit steadier. Is it anything to fear? Let's go and experience it. Actually, no, it's not. Okay. Am I willing to have that experience? Yes. If you're not, In fact, I'll probably should have made this known on the website before you signed up, because if you're not willing to have that experience, then the product's going to be pretty much a waste of time. End of. Send me an email, I'll give you your money back. Okay. This is the thing, nobody wants the experience, but you need to be willing to have it. Alright. Okay, so you've identified it, and you've identified it from observer position. So you detach. So if you look at myself over there, what's the very worst thing that can happen? I can have that thought, and I have all this anxiety and the rest of it. Am I willing to have the experience? Yes. Now I go and step in and imagine that situation now. So I'm having those thoughts, I'm feeling those feelings, I'm willing to accept it, and I'm doing everything that I can to create those sensations that I've been fearing up to now when I worry about what people think of me or what women think of me. Whether it for you, whether it's things that you say to yourself, whether it's things that you're imagining, whether it's a feeling that you're feeling, whatever it is, you bring it on as much as possible while you're imagining the situation through your own eyes and having that experience. So this is you kind of worrying, and then you step out, observer position, looking at yourself over there, and as you look at yourself over there, ask yourself the question, what would be useful? What would be useful for him to know while he experiences those unpleasant sensations? So you're an observer, again, so if the unpleasant sensations are really strong here, you might imagine it kind of like a half kilometre away, or you might imagine it really small. Whatever's useful to you, so you can feel the feelings the least. Alright, because sometimes you get sucked into a situation